Welcome to the Best Sports Betting Podcast, where we'll talk about reviews, previews, tips and all things betting related. Brought to you by bestsportsbetting.co.za. Now, on to our hosts.
How's it, punters? Welcome back to the Best Sports Betting Podcast. With me as always is Simon, and we're going to be having a look at the past week of sports, and we're going to be having a look at the week ahead, as well as some best bets for the Premier League. We've got some bets for the US Open and the NFL, of course. Simon, how have you been?
I've been well, Rob. It finally feels like things are getting back to normal. Well, in terms of sport, anyway.
Yeah.
So it was a good weekend. I mean, I watched a lot of US Open tennis, some Premier League, and then I spent the whole of Sunday watching the NFL. So it was a solid sporting weekend all round. So it kind of feels a little bit like the good old days before the pandemic.
Yeah, it does, and it's definitely getting kind of back to normal in the sporting sense. We've got everything, like you said, starting up again. It's great to have a selection of sports back on TV, and we're going to get more of that moving on. And let's break down the first week of the Premier League. Started up last week. We didn't have too many upsets. I tipped Arsenal to win, which they won comfortably by 3-0. And then I also tipped Liverpool, who had a bit of a scare, won 4-3. But that double came in nicely. I did take a couple more bets and some trebles and stuff, which unfortunately didn't come in thanks to Spurs, which I had a double chance in a couple bets. And they went down at home to Everton. That was the upset of the weekend, Simon. Any matches stand out to you?
Yeah, correct. I mean, I think the Spurs-Everton one was the one we looked at last week, looking ahead, and said that was probably the highlight of the card. And that was the upset. And Everton did well because they had a good portion of the possession. Often when these kind of upsets happen, it's sort of, if you look at it on paper, it kind of seems to be by fluke. But they had a good portion of possession, and Jordan Pickford was really good in goal. He made five good saves. But for me, the highlight of the weekend was certainly Newcastle's away win against West Ham. So
big win there, and I've actually got them lined up in week 2. So big win for us there.
Absolutely, they had. I mean, we managed to have just under half the possession, which is great for an away game, and as many shots on goal as the Hammers. So that was a good start. So long may it last.
Yeah, and the Hammers not looking particularly good, and but we'll chat about that a little bit later in our week 2 kind of preview. And any other results? What did you think of the Liverpool game? Nice 7 goals scored there. One for the neutrals, definitely.
Yeah, well, I mean, for Leeds' first week in the Premier League to score 3 goals against the reigning champions is quite something. As you say, a bit of a scare for you. I know you had a 4-leg acca which needed Liverpool there, so that penalty must have been a lifesaver for you.
Yeah, definitely. It was nice to pick up a win, and I had a pretty good weekend overall on the footy. So I'm hoping that continues as we have a look into week 2, where we don't have too many great matchups. We've got Chelsea versus Poole, which is going to be the highlight of the card. Have you had a look at the card, Simon? Anything kind of jump out to your eagerly betting eyes?
Saturday it looks a bit dull again, I must say. As you said, Chelsea hosting Liverpool at Stamford Bridge is definitely the highlights of the week. I think this game will be interesting because I think it'll be a good litmus test to see where these teams are this season, especially after last week, because both played, relatively weak teams. Chelsea playing Brighton and Liverpool playing Leeds. So I think this will be a good test to see where they're at. Chelsea are 2-1 for the home win here, and I see this price is actually getting shorter. And the only reason I can think of that really is, Liverpool have actually only won 2 of their last away games. But the question then, I think, is, how much we've discussed this many times before, how much of last season can you discount because of the fact that Liverpool had, already had the title wrapped up?
Yes.
What are your thoughts there, Rob?
I think it's going to be a very tight game. It's the beginning of the season. I don't think Liverpool are anywhere near the peak that they were. How many months ago should I say? Like 6 months ago. But they're still a solid side. They're going to give Chelsea lots of trouble. They've got the pedigree over Chelsea. Chelsea playing at home. I fancy a draw, to be honest. Maybe both teams to score, but I honestly can't pick a winner in this one.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be a very popular opinion, but I actually think 12-10 on a Liverpool win in a fanless Chelsea stadium is not a bad bet. If I were a bookmaker, I would make Liverpool closer to evens in this situation. I still think the difference in strength between these teams is still big, and I just think without that home advantage that players had. Last season before March, I think that that Liverpool are by far the stronger side. So it's tricky to take too much into account going so early in the season. But I do think that Liverpool actually look a decent price at 12-10.
So Liverpool 12-10. Look, I agree with everything you've said there. You've got all the points there. You've got Chelsea playing at home in an empty stadium. It is Liverpool. 12-10. I think it's a fair price. Even money, I think, might be a little bit short. You might see a lot of money moving Chelsea's way if they price it up correctly at even money. But look, if you think even money is what the price should be, and you're getting 12-10, then that's definitely a bet that's got some value. So I think I'll stick with the draw, and I'm not sure about goals in this one. I really can't call it. It's too early in the season. I think I'll just have a small stake on the draw and just enjoy the match.
I agree. I think an over under bet is trickier this time of the season. You need to just really see especially how the defense is set up. So yeah, it's going to be. I think you're right. I think it'll be quite a cagey affair. Yeah,
it's so difficult to call. I mean, I thought that Liverpool were going to have a solid kind of 2-0 win last week. That didn't happen. So I'm done kind of calling Liverpool's defense. So I think both teams to score, maybe 1-1, maybe a slight Liverpool. I'll give Liverpool the edge, 2-1 maybe. I'm not sure if Chelsea can pull it out the bag and actually pick up the win. So if I could get double chance on Liverpool or maybe drawn a bet, I've probably drawn a bet around. I'm assuming it's probably around 7-10. That might be a bit of value if you're looking to back Bull. But I do have some best bets coming up that I'm a lot more confident on for the rest of the card. So I think we'll skip along to that. One match that I've highlighted is the Arsenal versus West Ham match. And Simon, you can get Arsenal at a shade over 1.5. So 1.53, 1.52 at places. Pretty good price.
That does look decent. I think Arsenal really were solid against Fulham last week. I think that does look a touch long. I would have priced them probably at about 1.4. So that does look like a decent bet.
Yeah, 2-5. That's where I would have slapped that on. And Arsenal, I think, are in great form. I spoke about them last week, and when the Arsenal train gets going, it's really something to behold. And I like jumping on with the bets when that happens. They go on these kind of great runs, and I think they're in the middle of one of those now. So I'll keep backing them as long as the price is right. And I'm more than happy to take 5-10 for them to beat West Ham at home. I'll probably bank it in a few of my accumulators. Maybe pop Man U in there. I see on Betway they've actually got it at 1.55. So that's even higher than what I saw earlier. Yeah. So that's going to be my banker for the week. I know it's a low odd banker, but as Simon said, it probably should be priced a lot lower considering the teams. Anything else that you'd like to? You're going to be having a punt on for week 2, Simon, or is the card a bit too dull for you?
Yeah, not in the Premier League. As I said, I'm very interested to see what happens in that Chelsea-Liverpool game, and I do like that. I do like Arsenal at home, but I think we can move on.
Awesome. And guys, I want to apologize. I did tell Simon we would start off with a US Open recap. Simon called the winner last time. He picked it while I was on the Williams bandwagon, and she ended up going out in the semis. So, Simon, how about you fill us in on the US Open, how things played out?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think first of all, let me say, as a Grand Slam played during a pandemic, I think it was a great success. When you consider all the protocols they had to put in place even to make the event happen, I think it went off pretty smoothly. And one thing I also liked about it is I think having no crowds brought a different element to the games where players kind of had to pump themselves up, which I think was really cool to see. And as a fan, I found it allowed me to focus more on the tennis and kind of get in the players' heads a lot more. So just from that perspective, I found it quite interesting. In terms of the men's, team came into the final against Zverev as a heavy favorite. He was 1-4 or 1.25, which surprised me because Zverev had very similar numbers to Team going into the match. But I think the main reason for the short odds on Team was that he had breezed past Medvedev in the semifinals. which I didn't expect at all. They were both about 1.9 in that match, and he easily beat him in 3 sets. Not that it looked like a 3-0 set match, but
it can look a little bit lopsided if you're just looking at the sets. You have to kind of go into the game details to see what really happened.
That's right. And Zverev, on the other hand, he had a bruising 5-setter against Carreño Busta. So when I saw this price, I thought, wow, that does look out of line. And I wish I'd taken the plus 5.5 game handicap on Zverev, because it ended up being a really close match in the end. Zverev cruised through the first 2 sets. I mean, it was actually in under an hour. He was 2-0 up already against Thiem. So Thiem actually managed to battle back to tie it at 2 apiece, and then, after 4 hours and a few match points for both players, Thiem eventually persevered and won. Even though he was cramping really badly, he could barely walk. I mean, both the players looked absolutely exhausted. Shame. I mean, it was quite an emotional ceremony for Zverev, especially. I think both players were just totally out of it, completely tired. But yeah, it was fantastic to see Thiem win his first major. Both the players would have been a first major for both of them. So Thiem persevered in the end. And the ladies again, 2-sided affair, game of sort of a match of two halves. Azarenka completely dominated the first set. I mean, Osaka was absolutely nowhere, and then she dug her heels in and ground out to win in 3 sets. So she's now the U.S. Open. She's won the last 2 out of 3. So
she's what, at 22, or she's a
So it looks like
up and coming star. The star has arrived, rather. I think.
Yeah, sparkling career ahead, I think.
Definitely.
So no, it was great. As I said, I was expecting, especially with all the big players out, obviously it would have been nice to see the likes of Federer, Nadal and so on, but I just think the event was just a lot more enjoyable than I anticipated, considering no crowds and all those big names missing.
And that brings me on to my next point. I wanted to ask you what you thought about the tournament as a whole, especially under COVID. Was it... Yeah, look, I caught a couple games. I didn't watch in entire games. I caught lots of highlights, so I didn't really get a chance to take in the kind of non-atmosphere, if I can call it that. So I was wondering, what are your thoughts on the tournament as a whole? Was it good? Did you enjoy it? Was it did the COVID lack of crowd kind of affect things, and when it came to your basic viewing experience?
Well, yeah. I mean, as I said, I think having the no crowds actually. It allowed the players to they had to pump themselves up in each match, which was kind of different, from a lot of players, especially, there's some players in particular who just rely a lot on the crowds to kind of get them going. And it was quite interesting to see the players having to do that all by themselves. And I enjoyed it from a viewing perspective, because it kind of wasn't a distraction. You could just watch the players. You could hear every grunt, every moan, every kind of. I mean, often hearing them, swearing. It was quite a sort of, tennis already is a, you're all on your own out there on the court, and it kind of really. Watching it without the crowds really kind of got you into the players' heads, and you can kind of just see what a lonely and intense game it can be, obviously not being a team sport. So that I found it really cool, to be honest.
Oh, well, I'm glad that it was a spectacle to behold. I mean, I had the same feeling when I watched the highlights in the odd game, but I was just worried that the atmosphere might not be there. But then I didn't quite consider that you can have a whole lot of other things, especially considering it's 2 individuals playing each other rather than teams. So some interesting points there from Simon. And speaking of the US Open, we've got some golf coming up, Simon.
Yes, that's right. It kind of seems like all these majors are just rolling one after the other, which is great.
Yeah.
It's the 120th US Open, it'll be played at Winged Foot Golf Club in New York State. What I love about the US Open is it's traditionally the most difficult major of the year. So what the event organizers try to do is they pick very difficult courses, and they try and set them up in a way that the winning score is kind of as close to even par as possible. More recently, this hasn't been the case because there's so many technological advancements in ball flights and clubs and so on that it's actually very difficult generally to set the courses up so they're their play to kind of even par. But I mean, in the history of the US Open, there's been some winning scores way over. In fact, the lowest winning score in the US Open is 7 over. Can you believe that?
Wow.
Which is just So it's cool because they really try and create
break the players.
Yeah. I mean, it's fantastic to watch. So yeah, I've got in terms of the betting. Last year we had Gary Woodland, who was the winner. It was 110 to 1. I'm gonna take my chances on a few long shots again this year. I mean, if you look at the odds, you got 6 players under 20 to 1 in the betting, which makes finding a way to bet the tournament quite tough. I had a look at the odds earlier, and I was reading some previews, and I did manage to pull out 2 picks, but I was surprised that a lot of the guys that were being tipped were under like 20 to 1. Yeah, sure. Why don't you share those with us, Rob, and then I can give you my thoughts too.
You can give me your in-depth breakdown, whereas mine's more the difference. I haven't done my homework on the players themselves. It's more from articles that I was reading in preparation for the podcast. And 2 stood out for me, and that was Simpson at 29 to 1 and the Morikawa at 18 to 1, which I managed to find. I think they were pushing him at around 15 or 16 to 1 at other bookies. So I managed to find both of those at Betway. So I'll probably be having a small stab on those, just because their names are kind of came up quite a bit in all the different previews that I ran through.
Yeah.
So I don't base this on anything. I'm sure Simon will give a much more detailed breakdown on his selections.
Yeah, well, I mean, those are great picks. I mean, to be honest, as I said, it's really tricky right now because you have, generally in this event in particular, because it's generally set up so tough. You have the cream rising to the top where, the bookmakers at least fancy that there's very little chance that a kind of outsider is going to win, which creates this situation where you have very short favorites and quite long, not so long shots, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So
guys who shouldn't be long shots that are big long shots, basically.
Right. So you have the players in the front of the field at very short odds because the bookmakers fancy that there's not going to be a player that isn't in the highest pedigree that will win. And so what it does is creates opportunities a bit further down the field. So, of the favorites, and I mean the top 5 or 6, I like Jon Rahm the most at 10 to 1. But as we've discussed before, I just find it very difficult to take a bet on any golfer at that price for obvious reasons. So personally, I go further down the betting, and there's a few players that I like at fairly big odds, which, you always get some surprises in the top 5 or 10. So I'll take my chances there rather. I like Justin Rose at 60 to 1.
That's a good price. Wow.
which is a really good price. I mean, we must be honest, he's not in the best form, but he has one of the best US Open records of any player, and that's in history. Patrick Reed at 35 to 1, and Zach Johnson for a top 10 at 12 to 1. So those are the 3 players. Reed is in quite good form. Zach Johnson just always seems to find his game at the majors. It doesn't matter what he's been doing. He's always hanging around there. So I just like, you can get him at 150 for a win, but I just think a top 10 at 12 to 1 is a decent price. But it's kind of, that's the way I like to attack this, because I just think it's really tricky taking bets at those short prices when essentially anything can happen. Sunbet pays seven places at 50 odds, which is probably I think that's the best.
Yes, that is the best. Everyone else is paying 6 places, as I understand.
Right. Yeah. So that's a nice way to have an attack at this golf.
All right, and I like that you're taking quite a few top 10 finishes. Those are bets that I also like to get involved in. You can get Webb Simpson, my 29 to 1 pick for a top 10 finish at 5 to 2, which is also pretty decent. So I might have a stab then. I'm definitely going to pick up Rose. I like your argument for him, and 60 to 1 is something I can't turn down. And what's great about golf betting is, I don't bet golf to make money. I bet golf to sit and enjoy the golf and, make a couple bucks on the side and have something to cheer home. It's not often that I pick up too many winners But there's nothing quite like having someone on the final day, even if it's a small bet riding. It's a lot more fun. So it makes golf, not that it's not interesting, but it ups the entertainment level for me.
Yeah, and all the better if it's a big price. I mean, if you can just take a few bucks on a big shot and just expect to lose and you end up winning, well, that's fantastic.
Yeah, you put $5 on Justin Rose at 60 to 1, he's going to give you $300 return. I mean, that's it's $5. It's $300. It's a big difference between $5 and $300. So it's worth the risk in my opinion for some of those bigger ones. But Simon, let's move on to the NFL. Week 1, I don't like to get involved in. It's a bit over the show, and then I feel that bookmakers also tend to over-adjust for week 2. But week 2 we've got coming up now. We don't have too many great games, in my opinion. What are your thoughts on the week? I've got a couple standout bets, but I don't have too much going on this week.
Yeah, well, we completely forgot to preview week 1 last Tuesday for the podcast, but I know we did share a few bets with each other on WhatsApp. As you mentioned earlier, most of the big home favorites won. I know you came right with an accumulator with you had 2 NFL bets and two EPL bets. I fell one short of a 5-leg 20 to 1 ACCA, which was very frustrating, was the Indianapolis Colts, and they let me down. Even though on paper they were much better than the Jaguars, it was very frustrating to watch. The Colts scored a touchdown or a field goal on every drive, which means they had no punts in the game whatsoever. So to go and lose that game was very frustrating. They gained more yardage than Jacksonville, and beat them in just about every area. So to have that game cheat me out of a nice $5,000 payout was frustrating.
That was a nice one. Yeah, I got a 500 Rand free bet from Betway, and I just decided to slap it on to. It was Liverpool, Arsenal, I think it was the Patriots, and I can't quite remember the last one. But it managed to come in pretty comfortably, and it paid pretty well. I think it was it gave me 1-2 in profit, so I was quite happy about that little free bet that they swung my way. What stands out for you betting-wise this week?
So I think you hit the nail on the head a few minutes ago when you said that week 2 is kind of overreaction week, and I think that is always a great opportunity in the NFL because, and I know we spoke about this on the podcast or way back in 2017 when we were doing NFL previews, but what I mean by overreaction week is that most people who simply bet on the team, most people simply bet on the team that sort of destroyed the opposition last week without taking much into account. And so what happens as a result of this is that teams who played well in week 1 are generally overvalued by the market, and teams that underperformed are undervalued by the market. So what that means is you often get good value in week 2, and you can get this value either by fading a strong week 1 team or backing a weak week 1 team. Especially if the results in week 1 weren't really justified either way. For example, the Jaguars last week against the Colts. So as much as NFL is a very sharp market, and generally there's a lot of people betting into it, so it's very accurate. At the same time, there's also a lot of idiots betting into it, which makes it sometimes easier to fade the popular teams and make money that way. So looking ahead to this week with that in mind, I'm looking at the Falcons, the Atlanta Falcons this week, who lost their first home game against the Seahawks, but had better numbers overall. And this week, the Falcons are coming up against probably the most hyped up team from the draft in April, which is the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah, they had a very strong draft, made some great picks. Everyone's talking about them. They're the media darlings. And I like the Falcons getting 4.5 points here. And I know it doesn't sound a lot for an away team, but I honestly see these two at about even kill. And you can get an alternative handicap that gives you plus 3.5 at a bigger price. And that's something I like doing. And something we can talk about perhaps in another podcast in more detail is alternative handicaps on the FNL, Rob.
Yes.
NFL.
Yes, so for those who don't know what an alternative handicap is if you have, let's say, a handicap of plus 3 and you're getting 1.9, the bookmaker will offer you an alternative handicap. So they'll give you plus 3.5, but they'll drop the odds down for it. So they'll give you, say, 1.85. You can sometimes take those alternative handicaps up to even like 10 points. So instead of getting +3 on a team, you can get +10, but your odds are going to be a lot lower. Also, on the inverse, you can also spread out a -3 bet to something like -10. So they're great markets, and we used to bet quite a lot of those on teasers. They make for some nice multiples if you can manage to bet with a bookie that actually offers alternative handicaps. But we'll break that down in another episode. I think it's a good one to talk about.
Yeah, no, that's exactly. I mean, I think that's something worth talking about, because in the NFL, and it's similar in rugby, but it's more aligned with the NFL, is that there's some key numbers, 7 and 3 being two of them. So when the team's winning margin falls on multiples of these numbers, so 3, 7, 10, 14, 21, you can actually push the handicap to either side of these numbers, and then as a punter, you often are not risking too much for a better price. Something we'll talk about in a bit more detail, but it's very useful in the NFL. Sometimes you can find a lot more value by actually making your own handicap or choosing an alternative handicap. So that's my bet for the weekend. I like the Falcons. I think that even they're playing away from home, I think that 4.5 is too big. I'm going to push it to 3.5 and get 11-10 as opposed to the 9-10. And you can take those alternative handicaps at 1xBet. You can actually take all of them, so half points, from the top number to the bottom number. But I know at WSB and Sporting Bet you can take alternatives. There's less options, but they are still available.
Yes, they are still available. There used to be a lot more options. There used to even be able to take teasers and whatnot at Sporting Bet, but since they updated, they don't offer that. And just talking about different bookmakers, it's also important to shop around. I was having a look for prices earlier, and I found at some bookmakers there's even a point difference, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're betting on 3.5 to 2.5, it's huge, as you mentioned about going through the number of 3, which we'll cover later again. But so I've got 2 bets here, Simon. I've got Vikings +3 against your Colts. I fancy that plus, and then I've got the Bills, the Dolphins. I've got the Bills at -5.5. So those are 2 that stood out. I've got a couple other ones as well. I like the Packers on the spread, -5.5. Chiefs Chargers, I was looking at the overs. I'm not entirely sold there yet, but that was one I was looking at. And then the Ravens also on the spread, anything below 7 if you can get it. I think the line's around 7.5, 6.5, depending on where you are. So, but my best 2 would be going against your Colts with the Vikings +3 and Bulls on the spread. Bulls just look too good. I think the Bulls are going to do to the Dolphins what the Patriots did to them last week, essentially.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that, Rob. I think you're 100% right there.
And so I looked at a lot of these, and there's a lot of overreaction in these lines. I still think there's a little bit of value in some of them, which is why I did go with the Bulls. I expected the Bulls to be a bit more, but I was happy to see it was under the 7. So best bets, Simon. Best bets for this week. You're going to be taking some trebles, some singles. You got to snap a nice multi, or what would you say?
Yeah,
is your best bets for this week?
I think. Yeah, in terms of something to put in an accumulator, as I said, I like the Falcons there. So, the 4.5 or +3.5 on the Falcons, as I said, that would either be 9-10 if you take 4.5 points, or 11-10 if you take +3.5 points. I wouldn't throw any of my golf bets into accumulators because the odds are just too big. But as I said, I really like. I like the chances of Justin Rose at 60-1. You could take him to place either top 5, top 10, top 20 as well if you wanted to take short odds. Patrick Reed at 35-1 and Zach Johnson for a top 10 at 12-1. In terms of football, I like Chelsea. I think, as I said, it's maybe not the most popular opinion, but I just think that not much has happened, to be honest, between last season and this season. And Liverpool had very little to play with towards the end of last season. I can tell you now that if this match happened 3 months ago, Liverpool would be probably 1.95 or 19-20 in this match.
And they would probably destroy Chelsea.
Yeah, so I think you are getting a bit of value there. So it's always tricky to take an away team at a price like that. But I think that the gulf in talent between these teams is still pretty big.
Yeah. And I'm going the same with Arsenal. I have the same arguments for Arsenal there, playing West Ham. That's going to be my best bet. I'm even tempted to say that Arsenal on a goal handicap is probably an even more value bet, but I feel the 1.53 that I'm seeing at a couple bookmakers is good enough. I'm just having a quick look at what the handicap prices are, and you can get Arsenal -1 at 1.12, which I think is pretty good. No, is that right, Simon? Do I have that the wrong? No, I've got that the wrong. It's 2.3. Sorry, I had 2.30 was the
that
handicap.
Sounds right.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
And I think that's good. But that's 13 to 10. That's I don't want to say that's a banker, but I think the win's going to be something that I'm very confident on, and I'll be having a stab at that handicap as well. And then I will go with the Bulls for the NFL, and I don't have anything for the golf either as a best bet. Just Simpson at 29 to 1 and Morikawa at 18 to 1. Guys, thanks for tuning into this podcast. Let us know what let us know what you're betting on this weekend in the comments below. Simon, thanks for joining.
Thanks, Rob. It's always a pleasure.
And guys, we'll see you in the next one. Have a good one. Cheers.
Thank you for listening, and don't forget to visit our site, Facebook and Twitter pages. Let's go make some money.